My discussion point is around revamping the rail industry for our country's development and the continent. Since around 2012, we saw that the government invested quite a bit, or quite a lot actually, on rolling stock. You remember that around that time, there was a procurement of 1,064 locomotives for Transnet and 3,600 coaches for PRASA. PRASA's program is still in progress in terms of the production and manufacturing process. And Transnet, because of the impasse on the contract between South Africa and China, there has been some derailment in terms of the production. But out of that program of 1,064 locomotives, over 500, I think 560 locomotives have already been delivered. The major challenge that we've had now, from a Transnet point of view, has been around the spares, because some of those locomotives that have been delivered, particularly the ones from China, had to be maintained, but we couldn't be. The Transnet was not able to get the spares from China because of the impasse that we had between the two governments. I know that the Minister of Public Enterprises was actually sent to have discussions with China so to find a way that they can resolve the impasse. I think the results of the delays in terms of the maintenance, you can see it on the volumes. I think around 2016-17 financial year, Transnet had tonnages of 227 million tons. And we're down now, I think last year was around 160 million tons. That has a major impact on the rail industry, because your operator, your rail operator, should always be working towards increasing its volumes all the time, because then that drives the demand for rolling stock. That drives the demand for maintenance as well of that rolling stock. But the moment the decline, there's a decline in volumes, it actually means that there's no one who's going to do any maintenance. So it depresses the entire rail industry. Rail industry is all the suppliers to the rail sector. So when there's no growth, then the entire industry gets depressed. I think we're in that situation at the moment in the country. If you look at some of the challenges that we have, particularly in the rail operator side, you will see that quite a number of inefficiencies. If we're taking the manganese line from Sishen down to PE port, we're using back actors to load wagons with manganese. We're using the same back actors and front loaders to offload. Whereas if you go on the coal line, it's tipless, you tip 4 wagons at a time. It's very quick. When you tip them 4, it doesn't even take a minute to offload 4 wagons because they come in rakes of 4 for the tipler. I'm saying those are some of the inefficiencies that we have in our rail system that, if addressed, could go a long way in helping us to ramp up the industry in South Africa. So those are some of the challenges that we have now. However, because of the locomotives that are coming into the country, we believe that at some point the impasse between South Africa and China will be resolved, and they can finish off the other locomotives that still have to be built. I think it's about 450 locos that still have to be built. The next big thing in the rail sector is going to be about maintenance. At the moment, the maintenance philosophy that we have is time-based as well as distance-based. So in other words, we say this locomotive must come back after, say, 15,000 kilometers. Once it has traveled 15,000 kilometers, it must come back to the workshop for maintenance. It's predetermined items that we maintain. Or we look at the time, say 15,000 equals to 3 months or 4 months. After 4 months, it must come back to the workshop to deal with all the predetermined aspects of the maintenance that needs to be done with that. The challenge with that is that once it gets to the workshop, the artisans, they are working on all the items that we have predetermined. This is what we need to do when it's here. But when it leaves and it fails again, the operator comes back to you and says, well, this locomotive was in your workshop last week. It has failed again. Basically, we are not doing a great job in terms of maintenance. But the real issue is that maintenance has moved from time-based and to condition-based. It's preventative maintenance. In other words, you don't have to have a predetermined list of items to maintain. You look at the condition of that locomotive, just like your car. Your car tells you that you have to take your car for a service, for an oil change or oil service, to replace pairs and all those things. At the moment, that is where we should be going as a country, so that we can have a reliable rolling stock that is going to support the industry. For that to happen, we're definitely going to need remote diagnostics. You know, there are things like your bearings on your wagons, on the ore line, heavy commodities are moving on the ore line. The bearings, they tend to fail, but if you don't have remote diagnostics, the only time you realize that that bearing has failed is when there is actually derailment. The point that we've been making over the years is to say we need to start to have wayside readers along the line so that we can pick up when the temperature difference is higher than what is supposed to be. And then somebody can phone and say, let's take that wagon out so that we can change the bearing on that wagon. It's the same with the locomotives. For an example, you know, we saw at GE in America, there was a control room. They were monitoring locomotives in the field, and they were going up this hill, and the engineers were sitting there. So you can see the traction motors temperature has gone up, but we're not worried because it's going up a hill. But the moment it goes beyond the parameters that they've set, then they phone the driver to say, take locomotive number 5, take it to the workshop because that traction motor is failing. And others, they even go further than that to say to the workshop, there's locomotive number 5 that's coming to your workshop. Here's the standard operating procedure. These are the things that you need to replace on it. This is material that you need, and this is the skills that you need. By the time the locomotives arrive in that workshop, already the material is ready, the artisans are ready. I'm saying that's the direction we should be going in this country. We have 2,300 locomotives in this country, 49,000 wagons. If we don't do that, we don't have a hope in hell to change or to revamp our industry. There are other things that we need to do in terms of speed restrictions and all that, but they require a lot of money to do. But we need to deal with the things, but maintenance is going to be the major thing for us going forward. We're sitting with engineers there, and somebody was saying, is this not a business opportunity? I think the diagnostics are out there. It's for us to go to the operator and say, this is what we can offer to change the maintenance regime in our country. That is one aspect. The topic talks about Africa as well. The continent, the challenges that we have in the continent is an axle load. When most countries have about 15 to 18 tons per axle. That's the axle load they have. In South Africa, we're running the diesel locos at 21 tons per axle. So when we approach, for example, some of the OEMs to say, can we have a solution for the continent? Their view was that, look, we are not planning to build light locomotives now anymore. So as part of the legacy of this huge investment in locomotives in South Africa, I was still working for Transnet Engineering in Pretoria at the time. We took a decision to say, what is going to be the lasting legacy for us after this investment? Is it going to just be the locomotives that are running in the field? And we called our engineers, we had about 200 engineers in that business. So can we build our own locomotive? There's a locomotive that was launched by President Zuma in 2017. It's a prototype. Subsequent to that, we built 3 more prototypes. And the idea was to build these locomotives so that later on we can go into the African continent. But the first thing that we need to do is to buy them ourselves so that we can show that the world that we are confident in our own products. I think at the moment, those 3 locos are running and they are being tested by the rail operator, Transnet Freight Rail. But I think at the moment we are at the stage where we're supposed to be commercializing, or Transnet is supposed to start the commercialization of those locomotives, so that for the first time we can start selling locomotives. We've never built a locomotive in South Africa. That, to those 3 prototypes, I think it's a big milestone as far as we're concerned. The question is, do we have the leadership that can help us to start commercialization and first buy them here in South Africa? We use them here and we can start marketing and show people that we have a locomotive that is working here in South Africa. Hopefully, us as a group here, us as a group here, we can begin to start engaging the powers that be to say, this is an opportunity to manufacture our own products. What we're doing at the time was that this new locomotive that we've just prototype is sitting at about a local content of about, I think it was 30% at the time. And we said to our engineers, we need to move it to about 60% local content. How are we going to get there? Let's identify a few components in this locomotive that we can start building, design and build ourselves. The first one was a traction motor. You've got 6 of them in a corpo loco. The loco's got 6 axles. You've got 6 of those traction motors. That will help us to start increasing the local content on that locomotive. The same as the propulsion system. We're working with another OEM from Switzerland. We're saying to them, we would like to get the IP of your propulsion system. Their view was that if you build 50 of these locos, we'll be able to let you have the IP and then you can localize it in South Africa. My view is that if we can get to that point of producing our own, we can produce our own wagons, but if we can produce our own locomotive, there's no reason that Africa should go around or should sit without locomotives. We can start unlocking the opportunities that we have in the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have the second group, please.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think I'm just going to speak sitting. I'm sure I can get away with it. So topic of the day for us, petroleum of Lesotho. So people call it fuel, whatever it is. But I think for now, let's just stick to petroleum products. Load shedding of that, is it coming in the future? It has happened before, 2005, it has happened, November, December 2005. I've got a 20-year-old, and she said, Mama, load shedding is when it is specific that, at a specific time, you're going to have energy. It's time-based, for sure. But with the potential of fuel shedding coming, it won't be that at a specific time, you're going to get 5 liters. So it's possibly going to be chaotic fuel shedding should it happen. What we have at the moment as a country is that products, most of our refineries are down, as we know. We are challenged in terms of SFF, strategic fuels. The Morano Commission back in 2006 had made recommendations that we need to be at least at 90 days. We're currently hovering at about 32 days. So if the brown stuff hits the fan, you can imagine. What can we do? As a country, I'm just going to be ready fast forwarding in the interest of time and to also allow my colleagues to chip in. What can we do? It's a ticking time bomb. It has not happened as yet in the last 17 years, touch wood. What can we do as ELP? One, nobody is investing in new refineries. Our current refineries are old. Cost of investing in them is way too high. Some of them are being converted into storage depots. Inland and in the coast, currently we have 181 depots registered with the NSA. They all have operating licenses, but most of them are lying dormant, though they have capacity. So somebody earlier on spoke about business opportunities and what engineers can do. There's real opportunities in terms of one, revamping existing depots, that can store refined product. I mean, diesel you can store it for 12 months, petrol under certain conditions you can store it for up to 12 months. If it's still 20 degrees, you can store it for that long. So, long and short of it, there's opportunity for black industrialists, but also for engineers to really influence where product is stored and how product is managed. The reality is that we don't have refining capacity and not going to have anyone soon. Nobody is investing into that. So the question is then, how do we get ready for potential fuel shedding, which may come. One hiccup glitch in the supply chain, it will be at our shores and it will be quite chaotic. I think I'll leave it at that and just answer questions. Sure, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Thanks to everyone. My name is Tabando Khwegu, and I will just follow up on what Joe has spoken about. We're talking on the same topic. I think the most important thing is a reality. We have a huge shortage of storage capacity within the country. And fortunately enough, I mean, our business works for all the oil companies. And then I think even when Mapalala phoned me yesterday, I was down in Island View talking exactly with my client about the issue we're discussing today. There's serious challenges. However, there's huge opportunities. So personally, I would invite most of the ALP members to come. Don't be scared of the oil and gas industry. There's huge opportunities. The big five or big six, I won't say they're not interested. There are areas where they're interested in. However, on the storage side, I don't think they're interested for some obvious reasons. There's bad maintenance on the tanks. The whole coastal area, I mean, like, a typical example, one of the, I'll mention, BP sold one of their fuel depots in East London to a black, I'll call a black industrialist, a first in industry. And then all other oil companies are looking at that. However, what we need to unlock or where we need to assist is to fast track that process. The policy is there, beautiful policy. However, from a TNPA or Transnet perspective, I think us as a ELP, we need to step up and go and intervene, make sure those things are really happening, so that our own are benefiting in this huge opportunity. And again, the other factor from a business perspective, all these fuel storages Joe has mentioned, all their leases have expired. Most of their leases expired. And then if you're a business person, it's very difficult for you to put your money if you don't know where is your tomorrow. Because you need huge amount of investment, and then capital investment, and also the human resources to look after those after those facilities. However, you still have a month-to-month lease. So us, as this organization, that's why we need to intervene and say, Mr. Transnet, whatever department, can you fast track this thing so that it opens up opportunities? And I think the other issue is, I think it was mentioned before, is typical, same like on electricity, that you can't enforce these laws where you don't have alternatives, because there's no alternatives, and then you're enforcing these renewables into these oil companies, whether there's no working alternative. I think the other issue I will leave it to my colleague here, because I think we'll talk about the end-to-end from supply and also from a trading space.
No, thanks, Tabane. Thanks to my other colleagues. I just want to say, firstly, thanks to everyone and to you, Mr. Mapalala, for bringing us together. I think we don't know each other well, but being here, I can see how much we actually have similar areas of knowledge in the same industry. And by us being together here today, we are able to then meet, network, and push in the same direction. So my name is Lwazim Jali. I run a company called Lanele Group. We've been in the oil and gas space for just over 10 years. I come out of the industry in the form of Sasol and BP. I did work with Mr. Mapalala. We shared the same sponsor in terms of the Sasol bursary. On the topic that relates to how do we see the fuel sector and the concerns relating to load shedding, call it fuel shortages and so on, you know, I also want to make some contribution there. I'd want to make a contribution in terms of the big part of this sector, which is got to do with the storage and the island view, the leases that have expired, because right there is actually where the big issue in terms of which direction things will turn in the country. One, in terms of ensuring security of supply. Two, in terms of opening up opportunities for other companies that probably sit in this in this group, from a trading side in terms of supplying fuel for this country, in terms of engineering, maintenance, and operations. There is a huge opportunity that sits there. And it's currently quite constrained because of partly the dynamics around ownership of infrastructure, partly, as my colleagues have already indicated, the issues around the leases that sit within TAPA and the state of those leases having been expired and not actually going out to market to open up opportunity for new entrants to come in. And it's important to note the role that the oil companies themselves are playing in terms of affecting that situation and creating a stalemate. My colleague here did mention that there's actually been only one black company, black industrialist, that has been sold a depot today, which is a company called Wasa. They bought the BP terminal. In fact, the first time I was introduced to Tabane's company, we are ourselves in the process of buying one in Lady Smith, and his company was helping to do the replacement value, because the banks wanted to see that the funds they're putting in is basically going to be covered by the assets of the terminal. But it's not easy. So I'll just hit straight onto the first point, which I think is probably the most burning issue in the question of supply and demand and ensuring security of supply. The country, as my lady colleague explained, is in a net fuel importing situation. What that means is that the demand versus the local supply in terms of refineries has to be serviced. That shortfall has to be served by imports. Imports can only be done if there's sufficient storage capacity. You cannot bring a ship and start offloading it directly into trucks. So the issue of availability of infrastructure for imports in storage is very critical in ensuring security of supply. Of course, you then have the other distribution of fuels into the rest of the country. We all know that the bulk of consumption takes place inland. Then you are relying on other parts of the infrastructure, specifically the pipeline. We only have one pipeline, which is the National Multi-Product Pipeline, the NMPP. And then there's rail. Of course, my esteemed colleague knows more about the rail dynamics there itself. We already know that there are some challenges in the availability of rail, which itself has an impact on the ability for this country to distribute fuel into the inland. We also know that because of the single pipeline that connects the port of Durban to inland, any disruptions to the single pipeline, you immediately get to see it in terms of supply into the inland market. So those are key areas of, call it constraints or bottlenecks, potential bottlenecks that need to be attended to, all the way from the storage side, distribution in terms of rail, pipeline, and of course there's road, but the volumes that this country moves really cannot be sustained by road, which is why we need a functional pipeline and rail in order to move the bulk. What do we need to do? I think this is where the topic gets more interesting, and probably, one will share my views, but we are all here together. We can all think collectively of what should be the way forward. One of the critical things that have to happen is the issue that was raised about those leases that will avail the certainty of storage, in terms of the duration and the tenure of those TNP leases. There is a dynamic there. There is a problem that's choking these leases from going out into market. The oil companies have had them for over 50 years, and they've been rolling over in terms of renewal without going out into market. They see this market as almost predominantly theirs. They are reluctant to agree to the opening up of these leases because, for example, Transnet had an Island Blue strategy which indicated that the new tenants must have a 51% BE ownership. What that means is that when there would have been an oil company owning storage facilities, owning or rather running the leases with Transnet and having these leases 100% owned by maybe an engine, an EPL or Shell, the new tenant is required to be a 51% BE company. Of course, we know that none of the oil majors have 51% ownership. Now, what that suggests is that there would be an element of new entrants and black companies having some control into channeling of fuels into the country. And there's a bit of a stalemate because the oil majors don't particularly like that. So what has been happening is that there's a stalemate where the leases have expired. Transnet wants to go out to market to open up the market for 51% BEEs. The oil majors see that as a risk in terms of their control on the market. And there's been an issue where they are refusing to, they were essentially saying that if Transnet goes out with the mandate, they will not support it and they have a right to remove the top structure. What that means is that Transnet leases the land to the oil company, the top structure belongs to the oil companies. So they're saying if Transnet insists on the 51% BEE requirement for the new tenants, and they don't support that, they are prepared to remove their tanks, which will then create a bigger threat in security of supply in the country. So we've got this unceremonious stalemate between Transnet and the oil majors, and it's still benefiting the oil majors because for as long as these rolling of leases continue, the market and the situation remains the same. And I think this is where maybe we need to talk to each other about what needs to happen. I think our view, when I say our view, I think our view in the office is that we think there are probably two ways to deal with this situation. Probably one of the ways to deal with it is to say that because there's been a shutting down of refineries in the country, as mentioned by my esteemed colleagues already, we only have Sasol really operating inland. They're operating in Secunda and Sasol Bergs, the two refineries in Sasol, Sasol 123, as well as the GTL in Sasol Berg is operating. I think Astron has recently come back online. So the proposition is that the state needs to work on a policy that says that the importation of fuels into this country can only be reserved to the extent of the capacity of your refinery. In other words, you don't want to threaten the market of the entities that have invested funds or money into refining. But anything beyond that, anything where there is no oil company that says these molecules I should be producing them, where the oil companies are themselves importing from places that anyone here in this room can be importing from, that should be an import quota that is moved elsewhere. And the question of elsewhere is another discussion point. The elsewhere could be that could be opened up to BEEs, or it could run in a similar way if you maybe look at the neighboring countries like Namibia or Mozambique. They have a state that imports on behalf of, a state entity that imports on behalf of the country. In Mozambique, there's Imopetro. In Namibia, there's NAMCO. Even in Botswana, it's Botswana Oil. So what could happen, because the Strategic Fuel Fund, for example, is mandated for security of supply, the SFF could play that role of aggregating the import volumes, and then it could issue tenders where it allows BEs to actually supply the SFF, and on the back of that, SFF supplies the country. Or it could be the other way around, where SFF imports itself and the BEs play a wholesaling role. That way, what you are doing is you are starting to bring the control of security of supply into the hands of the state, where there will not be issues of questions around, we want to control the market, we don't want to invest until we are certain about this and that, and other restrictions, which, I mean, this is a big topic, but one of the restrictions that the country faces right now is that wherever infrastructure is owned by the oil majors, especially BP, Shell, and so on, they are not prepared to import certain fuels from certain locations in the world, specifically Russia. So this country could be benefiting from cheap fuel, from cheap crude, just like India is doing it unashamedly, China is doing it unashamedly. But the infrastructure being owned by British Petroleum, being owned by Shell, it means that these oil majors are actually holding the country at ransom. So you can't use my infrastructure to import Russian crude, because we are on the side of supporting the NATO decision to have sanctions on Russian product. All these things together contributes towards constraining these countries' fuel supply, security of supply, because you've got interests of private oil majors that are not necessarily aligned with the interests of the country. And you've got a stalemate situation where the infrastructure could be accessed by more, to create that flexibility in being able to source from anywhere in the world. You can source cheap crude, you can source cheap diesel from anywhere in the world. Other countries are doing it, part of the BRICS structure is doing it unashamedly. It's the right thing to do. So if you unlock this, you can then begin to create more flexibility in the country's supply and demand. And maybe lastly, SFF itself has been storing crude for this country and not storing finished product. In a country where the refineries are closing, storing crude doesn't seem optimal, because where will the crude go? Because we don't drive cars with crude oil, we drive cars with finished product. So essentially, SFF needs to move into owning storage facilities themselves, where they can hold petrol and diesel for the country, because that is what is really required for driving. So also
on the high-speed train, I think with the 1067, with the Cape gauge, we can go as far as about 80 kilometers. That is the speed now that we have, because of the curves as well, and the narrowness of the gauge. That's why you'll hear a lot of people talking about why don't we build a standard gauge and so on, so that we can have high speeds, because with the current gauge, it's difficult for us to navigate whenever there are curves at high speed. You're just worried about derailments and all that could happen. So if we have to get to high speed, we're going to have to look at the standard gauge. And standard gauge has got its own challenges as well. And I read a study some time ago that in Thailand they were saying to change, they have about 4,000 kilometers of rail. To change that to standard gauge was going to cost them about $4 billion for 400 kilometers, sorry, for 400. So it's about R1 billion per kilometer. And South Africa is going to be different. Those have got tunnels as well as bridges that you need to factor in if you were to introduce standard gauge in this country. Then on the second question around the private participation in rail, there's already a tender out from Transnet inviting, they are bringing another operator for the containerized cargo between Durban and Johannesburg. So they're beginning to open up. I think government is deregulating, the regulation of the industry has already started. I think there will be multiple players at some point. But that one, NADCO is a starting point where they're introducing a new player. And the tender is still out there to bring those new players. Then the question around the Gibela and the difference between passenger, the locomotives, it's about the size. If you are to haul 200 wagons of coal, of iron ore, the passenger coach can never pull that thing. It will just be spinning in one place because it doesn't have the power. But if you have passengers weighing maybe 80 kilograms, it's nothing compared to nothing compared to iron ore. So that is the difference really between the two. And what they are building there is also EMUs, so they're using overhead electrical cables to get it moving, the train. Then the concession, Kibela and Alstom is actually not a concessionaire. They won the tender. There was a tender there to build 600 train sets. 600 train sets, which equates to 3,600 coaches. But they want to build that over a 10-year period, with the possibility that after 10 years there will be another, if government has got the appetite to make that investment. That investment in Kibela is around 51 billion over that 10-year period. So I don't think there are any talks now, because that program is right in the middle, it's just probably a quarter of the way. So they still have to go on for the next 10 years.
Recording in progress.
I think that's my question on rail.
Okay. Ms. Kosi, your demand.
Thank you so much. So with regards to the 90 days versus the 30 days, I think the challenge in South Africa is that we do not have an integrated supply chain for fuels. I think Lwazi did allude to that. So it's every man for himself with regards to the oil majors. So for example, you'd see just before the big price increase, there'll be sudden shocks in the system that there'll be product shortages. So the oil majors will hold back in terms of products and only release it after the price increase to make a little bit more. And that also happens all the way to the retail sites, and including wholesalers who sell business to business. So the question is where to buy product, refined product. I think we've already come to the conclusion that we are major importer of refined products. We used to import crude, importing refined product. SFF did sell out a lot of their stock when they were doing the subsidy, and I don't want to go into that. I'm not a politician. I'm just an ordinary engineer. So the question is where to buy and who buys and where to store. And I think Lwazi did allude to that. So where to buy? There's a big elephant in the room. Do you buy cheap from Venezuela, from Russia, from where to buy? And who buys? Because the people with the pockets are the oil majors. And all of them, I worked for most of them. I think all of us has worked for most of them. So I worked for most of them as an engineer and now as a business person. So the challenge is they really control where to buy. So the government does not have a lot of influence about where to buy. Then the other question is where to store. So yes, Lwazi did allude to that. So in simple terms, Transnet owns the land and the oil majors owns the tanks, right? And they have been evergreen agreements. So there's 181 depots in the country, 181. Currently operating at 20-30% of that, because the oil majors are holding on to them because they can. So people like us, we're trying to, there's one depot for sale now in Pulupani, there's at least 3 more kind of for sale, but try buy one, good luck, and try get to product into it, then even more good luck. If you go into the NESA database as of today, you see that 98% at least is people applying to be wholesalers or retailers, importers, very few. Try apply for import license. Yeah, so, and how to distribute. There's heavy lines on the multi-fuel pipeline, there's heavy lines on oil, now it's by road. So the logistics in terms of getting the product where it's needed, that is also another big challenge. So should we have fuel challenges or petroleum products challenges? I think mostly it's the outlying areas that will feel the biggest impact, because how far and how difficult it is to get product to them. For us inland, it would be demand versus supply. So Yeah, do we have capacity to store? Yes, but the whole logistics supply chain in terms of how it's managed and the lack of integration thereof makes it impossible for us to know that we'd have the 90 days minimum as per the Maran Commission. I think the challenge is implementing recommendations that were done and consistently going back to recheck that those recommendations are tested over and over. So we wait for a crisis, same as we are waiting for ESCOM. And I'm certain that this crisis will come. It will end if there's any hiccup in the supply chain. It will end. I mean, if Transnet pipeline, Transnet strike for a couple of days, there was a big hiccup. Now you can imagine if there's a bigger tsunami or something happens, then yeah, it is what it is. It's what it is. So we're not on 90 days. And the 30 days number is based on each oil industry saying, I'm thinking I'm at 30 days. It's based on lack of data. Lots did allude that SFF can do better. Yes, they're revamping their tanks now in Milnerton, but they're only coming in 2016 and they're not even out to tender yet. And they're pending an amount of 500 million, but we do know that because of the government, it will be 6 times the amount and they won't even get engineers to recommend what needs to happen to those tanks. Tabani knows with regards to maintenance, how poorly some of the infrastructure is maintained. And as engineers, you can only lobby and try to push the narrative in the right direction. So yes, there's opportunity. Yes, we're not at where we need to in terms of stocks. Yes, we're on a ticking time bomb. And yes, we do have crude in the country, but we don't have refining capacity to refine it. So our product balance needs to be better. We need to modify some of the infrastructure to be able to store product for longer. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you to the speakers. Do you want to say something quick?
Okay, I think it's what it was the last question around the leases.
Oh, okay.
Maybe if ever Loaz wants to add, yeah, you can add. I'll take this one because it's an easy one. So the leases are held by Transnet, TNPA, because all these refineries and fuel storages are built in the land or on the land of TNPA. So you need to speak to them nicely, and then however the people that are owning those tanks, they're also playing their game. So on the other side of NESA, like Joe has alluded as well, NESA is more than happy to give you storage facility licenses if you ever go and apply for one. But the trick is, where do you go and build that storage facility? Because you need to have a storage facility in an area that has got an existing infrastructure and a working rail and a pipeline. So all those areas where there's infrastructure is these areas that are owned by these majors.
Loaz, can you comment as a last comment?
Yes, look, I think my colleagues have done an excellent job already, so there's not much to except maybe, the difficulty is always about what do we do, what should we do, because I think we all can see the challenges and constraints, but the solution probably needs to be a bit workshopped a bit more, because we all have maybe certain views, and I think we kind of need to spend a bit more time in that. I mean, like for example, we could, because there's a layer of political intervention here that is at play. There's a layer of how do we use existing policies to actually get things to be unlocked in the space. For example, NESA has a policy around uncommitted capacity. So if there's uncommitted capacity in a tank, NESA as a regulator of storage terminals actually obligates the owner to give you access. But when it comes to actually getting that done, it's a completely different story. We've had our own experience when we're fighting with the oil majors. It's ourselves to actually utilize that policy whereby we can see that the uncommitted capacity is advertised, but when you try to actually get the access, it's a whole different battle with the oil companies. There is the issue around these leases. I mean, this stalemate is unsustainable. What should be done? Should Transnet go out to market, and how do they go out to market? Do they go out to market to invite BEs to to apply with this 51% requirement? How do we anticipate the oil majors to respond? Can there be a political intervention at that level? Or is there some solution that sits somewhere in between, whereby the owners of the infrastructure can be the BEEs, but the oil companies can then lease from the BEEs so that they can still bring in the molecules themselves? Or do we bring in a big brother like SFF to actually be the ones that own this infrastructure? So there's some things that are remaining. Maybe there's are comments that I can leave, for all of us.
Okay.